Hello, my name is Konstantin. In this series of short lessons, we talk about JSight API language, so you can document your APIs in pretty simple and concise way. And in this lesson, I'll tell you everything I know about the structured types, objects and arrays. As usual, I will use the JSight online editor, which you can find on editor.jsight.io. It's free, it's open source, you can find it on GitHub, you can use it whenever you want. Let's start with objects. Consider the first example. As you remember, the core of the JSight schema is an example of valid data. So when you see an object in JSight schema, it imposes three requirements. First, this element must be an object. Second, this object must have exactly the same properties as in the example. And third, this object cannot have any other properties. You can see the valid data below which match this schema and which have exactly two properties, ID and name. And also you see some invalid data. The first example is invalid because it doesn't have the property name, and the second example is invalid because it has the additional property size, which is forbidden. And now I'll tell you about the rules which can change this default object behavior. Let's go. You can use the rule optional to specify some object properties as optional. In our example, the property name is defined as optional, and now the object with only one property ID is valid. Also, you can use the rule additionalProperties. This rule is false by default, but in our example, we have defined it as true. And now you can add any extra properties in your real data. And the example with extra property size is valid for now. But you can not only define additional properties as false or true, you can also specify the type of these extra properties. In our next example, we have specified that the additional properties of this object must be of the type string. And you see below in the examples of valid data that the object with the extra property size is valid because it has the type string, while the object with extra property age is invalid because it has type integer. In additional properties, you can specify not only built-in types but also user types, like in this example, and this will work in absolutely the same fashion. Now I want to tell you about the super powerful rule allOf. Using this rule, you can create an inheritance between two objects. Look, here we have a type animal with two properties, ID and name, and the next type is cat, which has only one property, age, but we have used the rule allOf and we have specified the reference to the type animal inside this rule. So now the type cat inherits all the properties of the type animal. Literally, all of animal. Let's find this type in the rendered documentation. You see that the type cat now includes properties ID and name, which it inherited from the type animal. But that's not all about the rule allOf. You can define multiple references in this rule. Consider the next example. We have the type cat, we have the type astronaut, and we have the type cat astronaut, which has the rule allOf, where you have references to the type cat and to the type astronaut. So now the type cat astronaut has all the properties from the type cat and from the type astronaut. Look at here in the rendered documentation. That's everything I know about objects. Let's go on to arrays. In the next example, you see the very simple array with one string item. What does it mean? It means that the valid data could be empty, could have one string item, could have two string items, could have three string items, etc. But what if you see an array with two string items? You know, this means absolutely the same thing, because in JSight schema language, array items doesn't tell you anything about the size of array. They tell you only about the type of the items of this array. And here we see only the string items, so the valid data could contain an empty array, an array with one string item, an array with two string items, etc. But what if we have an array with items of two different types? In this example, we have a schema with array with one item of the type string and another item of the type integer. What does it mean? Now I'll give you the deeper understanding of how the array works. An item inside an array sets the requirements for the item with the same index as this item. But the last item inside an array also sets the requirements for all items which have greater indexes than this. I understand that this could sound a bit scary, but actually it's quite simple. Let's look at our example. Again, in our example, the first item is of the type string and the second item is of the type integer. It means that in the real data, the first item must always be of the type string, and the second item must always be of the type integer, and the third item must always be of the type integer, and the fourth item of the type integer, etc., etc., etc. Got it? Let's look at our examples. An empty array is valid because nobody have restricted the size of the array. The array with one string item is valid as well, because the first item must be string. The array with one string and one integer items is valid, because first item must be string and second item must be integer. And after this second item, all other items, third, fourth, etc., must be integer as well. Please look at the rendered documentation. I'll switch to the table view, and you see in these requirements that items with index 0 must always be string, and items with indexes from 1 to infinity must always be integer. You may say now, why do I need all this stuff with different types of the items in array? And in majority of cases you are right, you don't need this. But sometimes it's quite useful, for example, when you transmit big spreadsheets using arrays. And the last thing for today, the rules which helps you to define your array size limits. They are minItems and maxItems. Since it's absolutely obvious how to use these rules, I don't know what to comment here. In this lesson I told you about the structured types, objects and arrays, and about all the rules you can use with these types. If you forget something, don't worry. You can always find all the detailed information on my favorite page, Quick Help. Here you will find the links to the type array, to the type objects, and to all the rules we have discussed today. Now I share this example in the cloud. As usual, you'll find the link to this example below the video. If you like JSight, please like this video, go to our GitHub page and give us a star. It will help us a lot. The link to the GitHub page is below the video. Thank you. See you in the next lessons. Bye.